Hey there, this is a leveling guide for the Druid from level 1 to 50. So in this guide we will be looking at the skill tree, legendary items and aspects, and how to play the build. Let's start with the skill tree. So the build is going to be focusing on vulnerable damage and crowd control, and applying it on as many enemies as possible. For the basic skill we will go with the Storm Strike and both of these two nodes, because this one applies the vulnerable damage on the enemies. As far as the score skill goes, we will go with the Landslide, invest all points into this one, because this is going to be your main damage dealer. Also take both of these two nodes, because these two work better than this one. Then you will be going on to the next defensive skills, and you will be taking the Earthen Bulwark, and both of the nodes as well. Not only that, but you will take Cyclone Armor, and both of these two nodes too. Because this one applies vulnerable damage as well on the enemies surrounding you, and knockbacking them at the same time. So you have like the vulnerable damage and the crowd control on the enemies at the same time. Next we will be skipping the companion tree, there's nothing interesting in there. And then we'll be moving on onto the wrath skills. So highly recommend getting the Hurricane, invest a couple of points into that. Get both of these two nodes, because this one is going to slow the enemies for 25%, so applying a crowd control, and also will be applying more damage with the core ability, and take the Savage Hurricane just for the little bit of the tankiness that it provides. Next, I would highly suggest going with the Crushing Earth, get 3 points invested into this, then invest into the Stone Guard. When you will be building Fortify, you will be dealing more damage too with your Earth skills. Take 1 point here, because all the critical strikes will be applying additional Fortify for you. And this works fairly well because the critical strikes are coming in pretty often, so it will help you build up the Fortify a lot quicker. Then go into these nodes and invest 1 point into the Elemental Exposure. Then invest 1 point into Endless Tempest, which increases duration of Hurricane and Cataclysm. Take 3 points in the Bad Omen, which will be dishing out a little bit more damage with the lightning bolts. Then Electric Shock, it will deal more damage to the immobilized targets. And also take the Charged Atmosphere. If you don't want to take the Charged Atmosphere and invest like 3 points into this, you can invest like 2 or 1 points then, and invest the rest of the points into the Hurricane. But in my opinion, this worked a little bit better than the Hurricane, but it's all up to you which you prefer. Then we will be moving on to the next tree, and that is the ultimate skill tree. You will be getting the Petrify ability. This is the main bread and butter for your build. This will not only stun the enemies, but it will increase the damage on them for by 50%. So that's an insane amount of damage. So you will, if the target is also vulnerable and petrified, you will be dealing a lot of damage, basically nuking the enemies. Take both of the nodes. Then we will be moving on to this tree. So we invest 1 point into Defiance, 3 points into Natural Disaster, because your Earth skills deal 12 increased damage to vulnerable enemies, and your Storm skills deal 12 increased damage to enemies that are stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. It's gonna work very well with the build, because you have a mix-up of the crowd control and also the vulnerable damage too. And also invest 3 points into Resonance. So Nature Magic skills will deal increased damage, triple this bonus if an Earth skill is the next cost after the Storm skill, or Storm skill is the next skill cost after an Earth skill. Mainly because your basic ability is going to be the Storm skill, and your core ability is going to be this Landslide. You will be changing between Storm and Earth abilities, and you will be increasing the damage of each ability too. Then for the passive, I would highly suggest going with Nature's Fury. So casting an Earth skill has a 30% chance to trigger a free Storm skill of the same category. In addition, casting a Storm skill has a 30% chance to trigger a free Earth skill of the same category. This works very well because it does add the ability for you to like switch up between the skills. So every time you will cast a Landslide, it might trigger either a Lightning Storm or a Tornado. So casting Storm Strike will trigger the Earth Spike at the same time. So you will be dishing out a lot of damage by just mixing up those spells. And this passive actually allows you to do that. It is a very fun passive. It triggers fairly often. Not only that, this passive also will help you with the ultimate skill. So every time you cast Petrified, there is a chance that the Cataclysm will be cast at the same time too. So this is a very strong storm build, and it is very fun to play too. For the last skill points, I would highly suggest just going with the defensive posture, 2 points here, 1 point in the thick hide, and 3 points into the unrestrained. Just build up that tankiness for this build. For spirit boons, you will be willing to take the awareness in the first tree, the swooping attacks in the second, calamity in the third, and take 2 boons in the last line and take both of the overload and the calm before the storm. Next, let's move on to the legendary aspects. So for this build to work, you will need a couple of legendary aspects, which you will be getting throughout clearing out the dungeons. So first aspect I would highly suggest using is going to be the utility one, and it is when you have Fortify, your Earth skills gain +2 ranks. You can unlock this one in Skarsgården. Most of the aspects that you will need for the build are going to be in Skarsgården in general. So first is the ballistic aspect, you want that one. The next aspect you want to get from the dungeon is the crash stone aspect. So your earth skills deal 30 more critical strike damage to crowd control enemies. Another great aspect is aspect of retaliation. Your core skills will deal up to 20 increased damage based on your amount of fortify. This one you can get in the Troy steps. Another great one for early game is to get the overcharge aspect. You can get this one in Skarsgården. An additional one, but not necessary one, is going to be the aspect of the Tempest. Consider getting this one. The next aspect you really want for this build is going to be the aspect of the Expectant. For the defensive ones, I would suggest getting the aspect of Mending Stone. It is in Troy steps. Or getting aspect of the Protector. It is also a pretty strong one, and you get it in Fractured Peaks. Another one you might consider is the aspect of Might, which you can unlock in the Dark Ravine and Joy Steps. Another legendary, if you will get lucky enough to get, is going to be with the aspect Landslides Earth Pillars. Each strike a second time and deal an additional bonus damage per hit. You will definitely want this one, but it's the luck of the draw if you get it. If you don't, the build is still going to work perfectly, but this one will make your core skill ability a little bit more stronger. But in general, it's not necessary if you don't get lucky. But you can get this in on the necklace and on the one-handed weapons too. For this build, I would highly suggest using the one-handed weapon and a totem, because you will be building up the spirit a lot faster than onto the two-hander. If you're going to be using a two-hander, consider using this aspect on the weapon then. It will build up this landslide damage a lot. Other alternatives for the defensive items is going to be this one. You heal for life per second, or becoming injured while crowd controlled grants unstoppable for 4 seconds. That was also, you can get this one fairly early on in the game too. And it is a strong one. If you get lucky, you can use this aspect too, which will grant the tornadoes to seek up to 3 targets. Not necessary, but you can use it and it works fairly well with this build. Now I will show you some gameplay and I will talk about how to use this build correctly. So engaging enemies, you will be using Urban Bulwark and Cyclone Armor once the enemies are closer to you, so you can push them away and apply the vulnerability damage. Then you will be using Landslide to finish them off. If there's a bigger pack or the stronger pack with elites, you will be using a Hurricane off cooldown. Every time you encounter the more enemies, use the Hurricane as much as possible. So you will be slowing them down and also applying the Storm Strikes onto the enemies to make them vulnerable and finishing them off with the Landslides. Once you encounter like 2 or more elite packs, I would highly suggest just getting as much vulnerable damage out onto them as quickly as possible and using the Petrify ability to make them stun for 9 seconds. During those 9 seconds, hopefully you have enough spirit build up so you can dish out as many landslides onto the enemies and the elites, especially just to kill them off as quickly as possible. If you don't have the spirit, you will have 9 seconds basically to build it up on the enemies just to unleash the landslides. So this is basically it, how to play the build. So you just build up as much spirit as you can, you apply as many vulnerable damage as you can, and also applying the crowd controls at the same time, using the Petrify on bosses or elites, and dishing them and finishing them off with landslides. And I will leave you a little bit of the gameplay just to show you how the build works. I hope this build will help you to level up your character, and I will be testing this build from level 50 to 70 to see how well it can go on to the late game. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like, and I will be seeing you in the next one. Have a nice day or evening, and I'll see you around. Bye bye.